This is a video I've hesitated to make because it's just going to make me feel old. But the show must go on for you good people of YouTube. So let's rock and roll. Here's the deal. 10 years ago I learned to code, not in high school, not in college, but self-taught in my mom's basement as a post-college professional. My programming language of choice back then was Java, which is surprisingly still the most popular programming language in the world. But since then I've switched over to Apex, which is very similar to Java, and it's focused on the Salesforce platform. Eventually, I got a job at Google, and for the past 7 years, I've been teaching millions of visitors to my website, sftc99.com, how to code, and I've also been really active in the Learning to Code community. And while I spend most of my time in Apex, this video is not particular to Apex or any one programming language. It's really about the broader Learning to Code landscape. So let's jump right into this. I'm going to give you reasons why it's easier to learn to code in 2020, and I'll also give you reasons why it's harder. And at the end, I'll give you whippersnappers my personal final opinion on this. And yes, I am going to do my best to avoid grandpa moments like, back in my day, we used to walk 5 miles to school in the snow, uphill both ways. But no promises, let's see what happens. Learning to code in 2020 is harder because there's just so much competition nowadays. Unlike 10 years ago, it's actually cool to learn to code. Or, as the young people would say, it is lit. Or maybe it's not. What do I know about what's cool? I'm just an old man. But what I do know is that the entire world knows the value of coding these days. In the US, computer science as a degree has grown in popularity. But what's more interesting to me is how much more international competition you have these days. I visited a college in India to teach code once, and I was shocked. Everyone there, literally everyone there, knew how to code. And it's not just India either. You have programming hubs opening up in the Philippines, in Ukraine, in Argentina, in Poland, and more. And so if you're going for a tech job in the US, not only do you have to compete with a growing number of programmers within your country, you also have to compete with a significantly growing number of programmers outside of your country who are probably just as smart as you and are willing to work for a fraction of your pay. You throw in COVID and the normalization of remote work, and your odds are just looking worse and worse and worse. However, it is easier to learn to code in 2020 because there's just so much information out there for you to learn from. Back in my day, you had to figure everything out by yourself. Learning to code used to require creativity, ingenuity. Nowadays, everything is just spoon-fed to you. Take a programming language. There's a billion hours on YouTube of someone teaching you it. Back in my day, you had to learn programming through books. Books, can you believe it? Physical books. Do those things even still exist? As the kids these days would say, oof. And hey, if you don't like all the free content on YouTube these days, you can attend coding boot camps. Literally, someone standing next to you 40 hours a week teaching you how to code so you can ask whatever dumb questions you have and get them answered immediately. Back in the good old days when I was learning, when I had a problem, I just had to sit there and stare at my code until I figured it out myself. Sometimes I would stare at the computer screen for 8 hours straight, only to figure out that the problem was I forgot to put single quotes around my strings. And if boot camps aren't your thing, well, Harvard University and many others offer you their world-class programming courses for free online. And if you don't like that, you can pay for courses on platforms like Udemy, Coursera, Pluralsight, and more. The world is your oyster. These days, it's no longer a question of whether or not there's enough information out there for you to learn something. No, there's more information than you'll ever need, and all at extremely affordable prices. The question nowadays is, are you too lazy to go through it all? And for you lazy people, when you do get stuck, help is just minutes away on Stack Exchange, which has experienced significant growth, on forums, on Reddit, on Twitter, on Discord, and more. People will offer you so much free help in exchange for what? Internet karma? What is this? This didn't exist back in my day. What a world we live in. You know, I would never sell myself out just for these fake internet points. Quick pause. If you like all this free advice I'm giving you on YouTube, consider subscribing. Thank you. Okay, learning to code in 2020 is harder because there's just so much for you to learn these days. The sheer amount of programming languages, frameworks, APIs, algorithms is just overwhelming. And the things people are doing with code is just so powerful and so much more complex than before. And you have to mentally take on all this burden. Also, the rate of change in the programming industry just seems to be accelerating so much. Just when you think you've become comfortable with the latest JavaScript framework, guess what? It's no longer the hip thing to use. There's a steezy, new JavaScript framework on the block and all the cool kids are using it. Oof! On the flip side though, modern programming languages and tools have made it so much easier to write powerful code. So many things exist now just to make your life easier. IDEs, code libraries, open source projects, these things practically write your code for you. And yes, technology is changing very quickly these days, but that can be an advantage for you. It is much easier competing against people in a brand new programming language than it would be competing against people in a mature programming language market that's been around for 10 years or more. Last one, learning to code is easier these days because you actually know it's possible. The biggest struggle I had while learning to code was believing that a guy like me could do it. Someone with a full-time job and a dead-end career who had already graduated from college with a non-technical degree. You know, this might sound like a silly thing here, but the mental hurdles are significant. It's like the 4-minute mile. For years, experts said it was impossible for a human being to run a mile in under 4 minutes, and so no one could do it. And then suddenly someone did. And after that, the floodgates just opened up, and suddenly everyone was running a mile in under 4 minutes. And so when I was learning, I just couldn't find any information on people like me who successfully taught themselves how to code at a high level. But nowadays, these stories are a dime a dozen. It's not even that big a deal anymore. Heck, some coding bootcamps even guarantee they'll find you a job afterwards. And you know, on my website, I've posted at least 50 coding success stories. And of course, you know, you have me. I've done this journey myself, and I'm constantly shoving that down your throat. Final conclusion. Is it easier or is it harder to learn to code in 2020? The answer? It doesn't matter. Erase this video from your memory and forget this ridiculous question altogether. You want to learn to code? Well, you know it's possible. Go do it. Don't waste your time searching the internet for excuses why you should not do something in your heart that's important to you. Is it easier to code? Maybe. Is it harder? Maybe. Who cares? If your conviction to learn to code is as fragile as this YouTube video, then you know what? Maybe you shouldn't learn to code. You were never really serious in the first place. And at this point, you've probably already decided in your heart that you want to quit, and you might just be looking for reasons to feel better about yourself. But if you have the same mindset as me and many other much more successful people, and you want to learn to code more than anything else, and you know in your heart that if you looked back in 10, 20, 30 years, you'd be disappointed in yourself if you see that you didn't put in 120% into learning to code, well then, I'd say this path is your destiny to walk. And should you come across a mountain along your journey, well, you simply climb the mountain. Hope this is getting through to you and I'm not just being dramatic. You know, learning to code is a life-changing milestone. I personally owe my entire career to it, and whatever seemingly innocent decisions you make today could forever change your life. It's very important. So contemplate appropriately. Thanks for watching my video, and good luck on your journey. It doesn't matter.